Thank you everybody for participating in this webinar. TESOL's International Association's Social Responsibility Intersection is happy to have you here. And we're pleased to present the webinar titled Equity for English Learners, Hills and Valleys to Higher Education. We are very pleased to welcome our presenters today. We have Lee Ann Shaw and Adil Bentahar. Thank you very much for this presentation.
Thank you, Nancy, for the introduction. And if you don't mind, since we have, we'd like to get to know you, just to tell us like which field you are. So today, I mean, Leanne and I are very excited to present on equity for English learners, and we're going to look at it from two different areas or angles within higher education. So the first one is going to be intensive English programs or English language programs in general in higher education. Here we're talking about college and university. And Leanne is going to focus on the same perspective, but with a focus on community college English learners. So if we can you just tell us, we see the name, so you can say, hey, my name is this, and this is where I work from. We just want to have a feel for our audience, because yes, this is an hour, but Leanne and I are planning to speak no longer than 30 minutes. We think that what we're going to share is going just to be, we want to create some opportunities for discussion, and we believe that's going to be more important. That's why we just want to share a few pieces from both fields, and then we can have discussion to elaborate more on those concepts. So Melissa, you're the first one on here. If you can tell us if you are more community colleges or IEPs, or maybe a different area within higher education.
Hi, my name is Melissa Farrow, and I am an English language instructor and an IEP that is situated at Texas Global, that's housed at the University of Texas at Austin.
Thank you. And then we have Raquel. Yes.
Hi, I'm Raquel, and I'm an English language instructor, also at an IEP in San Diego, California, American Language Institute at San Diego State.
Very good. Thank you. Then we have so Jen or Christine. It keeps changing here. Christine Voigt. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, you got it right. Hi, I'm Christine Voigt. I'm at the University of Florida ELI. We're an IEP in Gainesville, Florida.
Nice. Thank you. And then we have Jen Ramos.
Well, same as Christine. I'm at the University of Florida at the English Language Institute.
Thank you. Jen. So Amanda Yusuf Little.
Hello, everyone. I am at the University of Miami Intensive English Program.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. And Robin. And of course, if you don't feel like speaking, you're always welcome to share with us via chat. That works too. Robin Goodnow.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robin Goodnow. I'm from a credit ESL program at a community college in Santa Barbara, California.
Yeah. All right. And then we have Fanny Law. Oh, there's a lot of background noise.
She says there's a lot of background noise where she's at.
Yeah. That's all right. Thank you. I appreciate it. So we have Fanny. So, and then Lindsay Pereira. Again, I apologize if I mispronounce your last name or first name.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I work at the Intensive English Program at West Virginia University.
Good. And T. Clements, please. So we have Katie, America teaching yourself. All right. So is that so? Eleanor Cass.
Let's see. Eleanor says that she is community-based at tutoring in Northeastern Connecticut. Great. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Yes. And Jean Ritchie.
Hi, my name is Jean Ritchie, and I teach at Milwaukee Area Technical College.
Thank you. And Ellen Goldman.
Ellen, I know Ellen from West Valley College in California, teaching world languages in ESL. Great.
Thank you.
Very
Welcome,
good.
Ellen. Great to see you.
And Nat Turalba.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon. I'm sorry, I'm in the Philippines right now. I'm actually still a student, but actually taking a Bachelor of Secondary Education English major.
Very cool. I think you meant to say I am a student, not I am still a student, right? You want to say it proudly. Very good. Thank you, Nat. And so we have Katie. I think she already mentioned her affiliation. Fatima.
Teaching with the IRC in Atlanta. Welcome, Katie.
Good.
And let's see, Edgar? Edgar Perez?
Hi, good morning. I'm in LA. So my name is Edgar Perez. I am professor of ESL at Los Angeles Valley College.
Wonderful. Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
And let's see. And Fatma has joined us. Fatma from University of Toledo. Hello, Fatma. All right. Great. Well, it's wonderful to see everybody. Thank you so much. I'm Leanne Shaw. I teach ESOL in a credit program at Skyline College in California. And Adil, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. All right, so my name is Adil Bensahar, and I work at the University of Delaware's English Language Institute. I'm very happy to be with you here and present with Leanne. So today we're going to talk about two areas. The first one would be a focus on IEPs, intensive English programs, and the second would be on community colleges. So we want to discuss some issues of equity that may or may not apply to you in your field. But just so everything we share here is just some represents some general observations that we will share, but then it's up to you to take that away with further discussion, depending on how you see the topic. So we'll talk about some contributions of university-based IEPs to higher education, to American higher education. Then we'll have, I'm gonna talk about issues of equity for IEPs as they relate to students and faculty within universities. And finally, I have some suggestions for you how IEPs can create more visibility and then ensure they have a good presence within university settings, which is much needed for us all as programs. And Leanne, next. And Leanne will talk about the same, the same pattern in a way. So we'll talk about inequities faced by ESOL at community colleges and the ways forward. Next slide, please. All right, so when we talk about IEPs, we just want to have just a reminder of some context and a few issues that connect with us. So when we talk about IEPs, before we mention what we can do, let's just remember who we are. So as programs, so our mission as programs, we are. The US, for example, only has the largest market share of intensive English program students. So in 2015, we had at least 133,300, so over 134,000 international students, just IEPs in the US. But by February 2020, and that's the time for COVID, that number dropped by a large 45%. We're not even talking about COVID yet. It's just what happened before COVID. So that 45% of drop had significant impacts on IEPs nationwide. And these significant declines in IEPs as generally relate to student enrollment. And this emerged even before COVID-19, and they have been ascribed to a myriad factors. When we talk about the factors that impact us as academic units, we can talk about the political environments in the US, fluctuations in currency exchange, increased competition from institutions in home countries, and more affordable locations, such as the Philippines, for example, recently. And there's also a growth in educational technology and virtual language training, which can be another factor, not to mention budget cuts in government scholarship initiatives, such as Saudi Arabia's Kingdom Abdullah Scholarship Program, SACM, and also Brazil's Scientific Mobility Program. So these are factors that started to impact us as IEPs even before COVID hit. Now, when COVID hit, the landscape started to change drastically, and we all know now we're not even talking about student mobility programs, and this health crisis created a complex issue for institutions of higher education at a larger scale that triggered a fundamental rethink, not only at the university level but also at the level of IEPs from within. And now with online learning, for example, IEPs for the first time began, or I think maybe we were allowed by the government to offer online courses for the first time, which is a first for us and for our students. So with all this context, the political, the pandemic, it's very important before even we get to this level of saving IEPs or strengthening our position as programs. Another challenge that comes from within is that awareness of the IEPs within the university. How many administrators in our universities know of who we are as programs? They know their mission and our critical role at the university level. So that's another challenge that also, I will get back to it in a minute. Leanne? So we all agree that there are immense contributions of IEPs to American higher education. So let's think about our universities. There is that cultural component of it. We help our international students develop that healthy or smooth exposure to their new communities before they matriculate, or even during their matriculation, if they're in the pathway programs. We provide the study skills for them to succeed alongside their domestic or American peers. And we also help advance all the efforts related to internationalization and diversity. And these two are critical for higher education institutions. Everyone is talking about internationalization. So IEPs are part of that internationalization because generally it's the first station, it's the first place for international students. And not to mention how IEPs can add language expertise and resources to support other programs, support international students in other colleges. And we also help enhance the curricula of undergraduate and graduate programs. And finally, not to mention the economic piece of it, we help boost university financial resources. So because our students, they pay tuition, and even after they matriculate, they graduate from the IEPs, many of them continue they continue to study at the same university. So that's another contribution. Leanne, next please. So in the midst of these contributions, we see that there are some issues and of equity that's raised. And as I said before, these may or may not apply to your field. Some of them may, others may not. So these are just here some ideas for thought. We're not saying that this is what's happening elsewhere or everywhere, but just some ideas to take for discussion. So with respect to students, the F1 visa restrictions, and after hearing from some IEP teachers in at least 4 campuses, you see that there is that pressure on international students. Even so, when they are in IEPs, they have to take a minimum of 18 contact hours. We all know this. So at least 18 hours. Some students have more depending on the program. That may be a little too much. And even when they graduate, or even if they are in the pathway program and they already matriculated and continuing to take classes within the intensive English program, as international students, and I was an international student myself. I did my graduate school here, master's and PhD. I went through this. As an undergraduate student, you have to take a minimum of 12 credits, in-person classes, of course. And for graduate students, it's a minimum of 9 credits. So for some colleagues, they question how fair this is. I mean, it could be too much. And there's also so much control. I mean, so I remember a student who just changed, they would just check in or just verifying the courses in the system and dropped a course and was going to take another course. Within that 5 minutes, that person received an email warning him that he or she is going to be soon to be out of status because the number of credits went down, and although the student was going to add another course, so that pressure may not be healthy practice everywhere. When we talk about IEP credits, yes, some of them are in the IEP traditional course, so students take the courses with 0 credits, and some of them in the pathway programs, they count, so you can earn, students now can earn credits, but they cannot transfer everywhere. Again, we're not generalizing here, but this is another issue reported. And in ESL, for example, just the question ESL can be problematic in the literature. So ESL is not, I mean, English is not always a second language for the students. Our IEP students come with at least 2 languages, 1 language, 2 languages. So we want to make sure that ESL is viewed on campus as an asset. These students have 1 or 2, sometimes more languages, and then they take English. So it's not necessarily the second language. And finally, some international students, and I mean, this is also reported by, in the literature, and I can give you the name. There's a famous book called by Ying Ma about the Chinese students, and I meant to say Chinese because I know what Chinese students means to the pathway programs in many IEPs. The majority of the students tends to come from China, and these students who we see as students who are help us as programs, they also have issues because sometimes they become the victims of some illicit practices by agents. So the image and the information given to them in China, when the students come here, and this is from the literature again, sometimes the students are surprised. What they were promised is not exactly what they are given here. So our students sometimes have that pressure as well. So at the level of the faculty, some colleagues think that why is the tenure track aspect of our stability not available to intensive English programs? So even the professor level is not always offered. So if an IEP is a program that is recognized at a university, yes, I understand the answer is that IEPs don't confer degrees. That's correct. But they also have a level of stability, and they contribute immensely to the running of an education within campus. So that's an area that bothers several colleagues. And also IEPs are expected to be self-sustaining. During the COVID-19, for example, pandemic, some programs within universities have provided much support to some departments that had fewer students, but some IEPs were expected to be on their own because they are viewed as self-sustaining programs. So the support that you can get as a program in trying times is not always as many of us think or expect. And finally, the teaching load. I understand how important our teaching load is, but sometimes the teaching load, the workload gets in the way of those teachers, and I will get to this point in a minute, that it gets in the way because they can't offer as much service to be visible within campus, and it also might get in the way in terms of scholarships. So those IEP teachers may be so immersed in teaching that they are not really able to publish or read or build that visibility that will ultimately benefit the programs as well. Leanne? So for some ways forward, and again, these are just some food for thought for discussion. So as IEPs, it's very important to secure locations on campus. So it is well known amongst us that some IEPs choose to be off campus, but being on campus is critical because that will help you make your case as a program that is essential to the university. It's also important to collaborate with academic units. We really don't want to have IEPs living in their own shell as IEP or ELI. It's important to be part of the university, and that starts with deliberate efforts to collaborate with other academic units and departments and colleges, of course. So it's also important to build on the pathway program model or the bridge program model because offering credits bearing courses helps both attract more students, and at the same time, it paves the way for more collaborations with other colleges. And that's one way of doing it. And finally, it's essential to continue to offer online courses. So the pandemic was a great experience for us as programs to offer and migrate our in-person materials to transfer that into online courses. So all those efforts, all those courses that we taught online during COVID are there to stay. We don't have, we go back to face, but we go back to face and capitalize on everything we have created online. This way, this is going to help us tremendously market our programs internationally. And I think, Leanne? So for faculty, and this is just my opinion here, I believe that it's very important for us as faculty, despite all our teaching obligations, it's very important to continue to build our professional development. We need to continue or to take that habit of reading publications, create professional learning communities where teachers get together, they read some articles related to IEP, of course, and then they see what implications we can have. I think that's a great experience. We should, as faculty also, we should connect with other units. So instructor, this will help us understand what other students will need after they graduate from the IELI or the IEP. And that knowledge will also be essential for us to incorporate into our instruction, while the students are with us. Also, whenever possible, investing in active scholarship. So publishing also helps us create that visibility on campus and nationwide. And finally, we also need to continue to advocate for our students. Because if we IEP instructors don't advocate for them, or administrators, we don't advocate for our students, no one is going to. And so that falls on us. Finally, for administrators, it will be great to continue to make sure that students, especially students taking classes from overseas, have equitable use of services. So for the students who are face-to-face, sometimes our IEP students may not have full access to all the services given to the students. So we want to make sure they also have those services for them to integrate smoothly into the university life. And while continuing to hire adept professionals who can make you proud, we should also encourage them to thrive and have more opportunities and support for them to better represent the IEP, but also to grow within campus and beyond. And I think that's all for me. I hope these ideas will be will give us some food for thought that we can discuss, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after Leanne's presentation. Back over to you, Leanne.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Adil. And I can see that there is a good mix of IEP faculty and staff, as well as community college faculty and staff here. And Adil and I were reminiscing on just the commonalities of issues that we have between the two. At community colleges, we often do have IEPs, but really when I speak of ESOL at a community college, I'm not speaking about the IEP experience so much as the domestic student experience. And I'd like to start off with a couple myths that we often have to counter in English for speakers of other languages at community colleges. Myth number one is the idea that ESOL is somehow life skills, but it's not collegiate subject matter. The reality is that ESOL is taught in community colleges. It is collegiate subject matter. It is taught in credit and non-credit. And college ESOL content is on par with and often exceeds the content of world languages like Spanish, Chinese, or Arabic. But while 4 semesters of Spanish will transfer to the university, 4 semesters of ESOL does not transfer, and why not? It is a foreign language to those who are learning it as such. Myth number 2 that we often contend with is the idea that ESOL is somehow remedial. It is pre-collegiate, just like pre-collegiate English and math. The reality is that 70% of ESOL students in California community colleges, and this is a huge system of 116 schools, I believe, 70% are adults. They did not come from high school. They did not arrive to college lacking something that they need to remediate. They are adults who never matriculated through U.S. high schools. Many of them have advanced degrees. Many of them speak multiple languages. So this idea of conflating ESOL as remedial is inaccurate, and it does not serve the profession, and it does not serve our students. It also causes a lot of issues down the line. For example, ESOL faculty and departments are always put in this position of we know we're a solution, but we are seen as a problem. And there are a lot of tension points that get created. We know we're a solution. We know we are a solution. And program enrollment coordinators tell us this all the time. They're constantly thanking us for preparing this diverse student body to enter their programs. But there's also some pushback. For example, we get a lot of counselors and advisors who complain that ESOL classes waste financial aid. This is a point, okay? This is a point. But when they bring this up, then students, of course, are saying, yes, I can't use these credits for anything. They're these empty calorie credits that I get, that I can't use them for anything. And I'm wasting time and money. Regardless of whether they may need the English to increase their success in education, as soon as money comes up as a subject, then it feels like a waste of time and a waste of money. In addition, institutions love to trot out this statistic that only 8% of students who begin in ESOL sequences make it through to transfer level English. Now, that may be a fact, but is it because ESOL is a problem? There are probably other factors that are going into that. So, but this is a statistic that gets trotted out constantly, and it makes ESOL look like a problem rather than a solution. And finally, when we talk about content teachers, I always get a little rankled at this because I know I teach content as an ESOL faculty member. When I speak of content teachers, of course, I mean people who aren't teaching ESOL, they're teaching, biology, physics, etc. Content teachers are frequently pointing to ESOL as not adequately preparing students for their fields. So ESOL exists in this sort of problem solution space where people don't really know what to do with us. We know we're a solution, and I think everybody wants to see us as a solution, but these problems keep coming up, and it casts a shadow over ESOL, and it creates these hills of inequity for ESOL. And what doesn't help is the fact that our field and the way that our campuses talk about our field is riddled with deficit terminology. So we have even just the name English as a second language, as Adil mentioned earlier. Our students often speak multiple languages. So the idea of a second language speaker, or Generation 1.5, language minority speaker, linguistic minority, and the one that really hurts, limited English proficient. This is very deficit language. And when you're having conversations about English for speakers of other languages and access for ESOL students, if this language is in the discussion, it really changes the effectiveness of what you're able to create for these students. The conflation of ESOL with remedial education also is problematic. ESOL is frequently housed in developmental departments. There are a few campuses who will house it in world languages or humanities, but for the most part, ESOL is often housed in a developmental department. We are seen as life skills or literacy. We're not seen as collegiate. And this pushes us to the margins of the campus, which means that we are often left out of discussions of matriculation and discussions of what we call educational pathways to degree. So while IEPs have pathways from the IEP into the campus, ESOL for domestic students doesn't necessarily have its own pathway. It is very difficult to get into those conversations and become part of the fabric of the college's creation of pathways to education. So ESOL gets pushed to the margins here. Plus, ESOL faculty are not really seen as teaching content, and This gets frustrating because we are often experts in intercultural communication, brain research, multiple styles of pedagogy. So there's a lot that ESOL faculty can bring to the discussions of equity and ESOL and campus and student success. And we're not always brought into those conversations. So when you think about this, well, you've got to ask yourself, why is this happening? Nearly 5 million US public school students are identified as English language learners. Okay, that's public school. And this is 2015 data. I had a little difficulty getting specific numbers that are more recent. But in 2015, the data was showing nearly 5 million US public school students identified as ESOL, and most are people of color. 75% are Hispanic, 11% Asian, and an estimated 3.7% would identify as Black. That's 90% of our population as people of color. So when ESOL is pushed to the fringe, our students are being pushed to the fringe as well. And our campuses might not be recognizing this when they're not including us in discussions of equity and inclusion. So the solution would be Equitize education, yes. And I've got to tip my hat to California for addressing something very, very difficult. There was historic legislation, Assembly Bill 705, introduced by Senator Irwin in 2017. And Assembly Bill 705 attempted to address this fact that placement tests into community colleges were overplacing non-white native speakers into remedial education. And this was delaying pathways to graduation, it was increasing costs to the student, and it was raising failure rates because the lower they enter into a sequence, the less likely they are to ever make it out the top. In fact, many colleges had students going through ESL, and the college was forcing them to go into remedial classes for English and math before they could go into their actual transfer level coursework. No wonder they weren't making it through. The solution, we eliminated placement tests. We are working towards no more remedial English and math pathways to transfer. There's a bill in the Education Committee right now that is going to close that loophole. And there is now efforts to have direct placement into transfer level coursework. Now, there's 3 tiers of higher education in California, where the community colleges, we have the California State University, CSU, and the University of California, the UC. And what we're seeing at the CSU and UC level is a decreasing reliance on SATs and admission tests as well. So yay, okay, we're getting rid of discrimination via placement tests, except there are some unintended consequences. And that's where having been pushed to the margins of our campuses is causing issues for ESOL. With the elimination of placement tests, colleges are unable to identify and assess English language learners upon arrival for placement into ESOL sequences. So what's happening is English language learners are entering transfer level English. They're identified not as English language learners. They're identified as English learners. They're coded, they're identified as English students or just college students. They don't have a special marker identifying them as English language learners. So what this means, they may succeed, yay. They may not succeed, but there's no data tracking whether their success or their failure had anything to do with language proficiency. So we have no idea if we are even serving these students well, or if they would have been better served had they been identified and started through the ESOL pathway before they went to transfer level English. In addition to that, we also have in California what's called the 3 strikes law, which means that there's a limit on course takes to 3. You can take a course 3 times, and if you drop it the day after you sign up, or if you drop it sometime, a couple months later before the drop date, or if you fail it, that equals 1 take. If you surpass 3 takes, you cannot take that course again in the same district. So this is causing a pinch point for English language learners. But we don't have data to prove it because they're not being coded as English language learners when they go into transfer level English. So what this results in is further stigmatization of ESOL. It further reinforces ESOL inaccurately as developmental, and it further shows ESOL as being some kind of problem that would have delayed students' pathway to education. And the overall result has been a dramatic decrease in ESOL enrollment, despite an increasing need for ESOL statewide. So even as we are trying to equitize education, the fact that ESOL is constantly pushed to the margins of the campuses means that there are these unintended consequences for our students. So here are some ways forward that I am proposing, and it's really going to take a lot more than this webinar. First of all, we really need to change the deficit approach that we have in viewing ESOL to an asset approach, just as Adil mentioned earlier. We need to embrace the assets that are brought by multilingual students. Speaking more than one language is an asset. You are not lacking something as you come into a learning education. You are bringing something to that learning institution. And when we look at our students coming into the college as lacking something or needing to complete their ESOL before they become real students of transfer level coursework, that is a tool of white supremacy. What we are essentially saying is that there is an ethnocentric expectation of a student when they enter this college. And we need to decenter that ethnocentrism because it's enabling those deficit views towards ESOL. We need to let ESOL programs be the solutions that they are. And that means that our educational pathways need to integrate ESOL. Every other special population, veterans, foster youth, they have specific supports worked into their educational pathways. Why is ESOL not also a special population so that we can apply those special supports to that population? And while students are studying ESOL, why not give them something for what they're studying? How about certificates for multilingual competencies? That's a game changer in the job market today. If you can say, yes, I am fluent in 2 of my home languages, and I'm also fluent in English, I am a multilingual speaker, that's a huge asset. And so that can go a long way in convincing the community, convincing the administration, convincing the board that multilingualism is a valid asset. Furthermore, we need to be advocating for ESOL students as a population, a special population that deserves incentives and supports, scholarships, fee waivers. And we have so many students who come to us with complete degrees in other countries. Why are we making them take calculus again? Okay, there needs to be some foreign degree equivalency. There needs to be some way of being able to honor a lot of the work that they have done in their own in their home countries before they come here, rather than further delaying their time to graduation by making them retake classes that they really don't need. And we need assessment. Yes, assessment as a placement tool for native speakers can be discriminatory, and we have seen that. But assessment for language learning is necessary because we need to know what you need in order to help you on your pathway to success. We need assessment that identifies language learners. We need assessment that accurately places language learners and doesn't exclude them from other pathways, doesn't keep them out of other classes that they can take at the same time that they are taking their ESOL. And finally, we need to be integrating ESOL into campuses. And this is where ESOL faculty need to be at the center of all discussions about equity and inclusion and challenge their administration
to bring ESOL into those campus discussions. We represent 90% of people of color in our department, okay? That we have to be advocating for these students. And when we are pushed to the margins, our students are pushed to the margins. We need to be fierce about decoupling ESOL from remedial coursework and all associations with remediation. And we need to treat ESOL as the world language that it is. And that means that we need to be pressuring the universities to accept those units for transfer. Why do 4 semesters of Chinese transfer, but 4 semesters of ESOL does not? Not even 1 semester of ESOL will transfer. So we need to be pressuring universities, which means you probably need to get the recording of this webinar and lock your administrators in a room and force them to watch it so that they can be carrying on that conversation in the circles where they speak and connect. And there needs to be a recognition of the depth of content that is taught in ESOL. We're not teaching people to read a medicine bottle here. We are teaching them to read and communicate and to advocate and to argue and to convince and to support. We are teaching them all of those things in a foreign language. We also need to look at how we view our students when they arrive to our campuses. They're not lacking something. They're not broken. They're not in need of remediation. We need to look at them as fully actualized students who bring assets to our campus. They bring the richness of diversity, and they have so much to teach us. And there is so much that they can bring that can transform our campuses. We need to change from the concept that we need them to fit us. We need to fit our student body. And that is a mindset that needs to shift before ESOL can be truly supported and before our students can be truly supported. We need to utilize the assets brought by ESOL faculty. Many ESOL faculty have abundant skills in intercultural communication, brain-based research. We are some of the least utilized faculty on campus. We need to not be at the margins. We need to be at the center of campus discussions. And what it really comes down to is normalizing multicultural education and getting away from this idea that this ancient structure that was passed down to us from on high is somehow revered and worth saving. Multicultural education breaks that whole idea apart. It embraces the diversity of the students that we have, and it recognizes that we are not a fixed entity. We are growing and changing with our student body, because an educational institution that grows and changes with its student body is the educational system that can transform the world. So these are some ways forward. I would love to hear from people on what you are doing at your campuses or the concerns that you have with what Adila and I have presented. We can go ahead and open it up to questions now, and then you see our contact information there. Let's see, do we have, looking at our chat. All right, do we have any questions? You can raise a hand, or we're kind of a small group. You could unmute yourself, or you could type a question into the chat. Give everybody a minute. I am curious just to know what efforts to integrate ESOL and integrate IEPs into your institutions have worked for you, or any barriers that you've faced.
I can probably speak better to barriers than I can to what's
Go right
working.
ahead.
Go right ahead, Robin. Thank you.
In California, we also have the Guided Pathways movement, and it's been extremely challenging to get ESL into that conversation and integrated into Guided Pathways funding and support and efforts because of exactly the perceptions that you have pointed out. Guided Pathways has been limited to conversations that around classes that lead to a degree. So we're in that again. It's also extremely challenging to get non-credit ESL into the conversation about pathways to credit. And so I guess I'm looking for ideas because I see a lot of what you mentioned about AB 705 and the effects it's had on credit ESL specifically as part of, I don't know if it's a deliberate or intentional effect, but to drive ESL instruction into non-credit and stop providing the credit option in a lot of cases, just by attrition. So as I said, I guess I'm looking for ideas.
I hear you. I do suspect that there is an agenda. I think that if you look at the funders of AB 1705, which is the new bill that's going to basically prevent counselors from even bringing up a remedial class or a pre-collegiate class to students, that's going to be detrimental to ESOL students. We know this, even though no one's talking about that. That bill is being funded by the Lumina Foundation, who get their money from the student loans. So basically, we're looking at legislation that is being supported by the people who are interested in the cash cow students. Those are the students born here who are moving through to, education, moving through their educational pathway. And we're missing a whole chunk of students who did not matriculate from high schools and really need to be served and to be supported. So I think there is some intention in that. I think the best way to fight it is to demand that we be brought into discussions of equity and inclusion. You've got to use the language of equity and inclusion because 90% of our students are people of color. And when we get pushed to the margins, our students get pushed to the margins. And so we need to be in every single DEI discussion on campus, screaming our heads off about our students. And, where is the equity in forcing a student to go directly into transfer level English, not even knowing anything about their language proficiency and being unable to even identify them once they get there because they haven't been coded as being a language learner to begin with. And so where is the equity in sending a student off that pathway without the necessary supports for language? So.
Yes, to all of that. And I guess I would add that where we have had success is exactly where you just mentioned. I sit on the C committee for equity funding. I have really stressed somewhat successfully equity as the issue. And at the level of faculty decision making, that works very well. At the administrative level, it's not as successful. And there's often a lack of support for, you mentioned regarding ESL as a special population. That it's a mixed bag. There's some support for it. But then when it comes to funding, which is always where the rubber meets the road, there's always the discussion of scaling everything, which basically means if it's good for a special population, it would be great to offer it to everyone, which we can't ever afford to do, and it dilutes what the special population ultimately gets.
Exactly. Thank you for bringing that up. Adil, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
So I switched to my phone, so I can't see everyone else. Leanne, could you please stop the share?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to ask those colleagues in IEPs. So part of advocating for our international students is making sure that they have a full experience here in the US. And that also means that we should promote the co-curricular activities that match the academic piece of their IEP experience. So IEPs are not all about the subjects and the verb agreement that they learn through textbooks, but it's also about what they get outside the classroom. So that co-curricular aspect was affected when our students, when we went into lockdown. So we transitioned into online education and in IEPs, which was a first for us. But that also meant that our students, those who were still in person, who stayed in the US, or also those who resumed their IEP education online or remotely. So how did the co-curricular, how did your program manage, or to handle engagement even while the students were online? So I'd like to hear, like, what efforts did your program have, and how successful? Maybe you have some success stories that you can share with us, because that's part of our mission as IEPs, to make sure the students are engaged the proper way, whether it's in person or online. Any success stories, any experiences here?
Could I ask a quick question, Adil, because I'm not as familiar with IEPs and their online instruction? When you're talking about online instruction, are you talking fully online, or are you talking Zoom instruction, live meeting with students online? Just for my education.
So starting March 2020, just like, as universities closed and all instruction went online, IEPs as academic units on campus also had to close, right? So many if not all IEPs, I believe, they had an interrupted semester, so they migrated all instruction to online. Many through Zoom, others through other platforms, but instruction continued, even if during that spring and summer, and also for almost an entire year, depending on the program. So I can't speak for other programs, but at the ELI, for example, we went officially back to face-to-face in the fall of 21 here at the University of Delaware. But from the 23rd of March 2020 until August 21, over a year, all instruction was primarily online. So we had the Zoom, we had the same courses that were migrated to an online mode, and we just continued. Some students stayed in the US, so they lived here in Delaware, for example, and took the classes online, and many went back home and resumed the instruction remotely. So making sure, especially the students who were, since everyone was online, making sure that co-curricular piece of it was not as easy as it might sound, because you can't have the students engage in the new communities while everyone's online. So that's why I was asking, sir.
I think what that question really reveals, Adil, is just how little crossover and connection there often is, and I'm speaking from the community college perspective, between IEPs and domestic ESOL programs. And really, many community colleges have IEPs, but we operate so differently, and we don't really communicate, and it really shows how little at the community colleges we really know about the world of IEPs. We don't really understand the whole issue of IEPs, and if we don't understand it, how do we expect the rest of the campus to understand it? So just you bringing up this question really just shows how we need to be supporting each other. We need to be banding together and to be strengthening our forces so that both of our programs can be heard.
I agree with you. I think IEPs have that responsibility to start from within, from their campuses, and instead of expecting other colleges and administrators to know who IEPs are, again, many IEPs are successful in doing this, but just in case, I think that, that creating that visibility begins from within. So yes, I think it's important that IEPs collaborate with other units and other instructors, see who their students are and where they will go. Is engineering, is it business? See what kind of skills those students will need when they finish IEP, so that they can incorporate those skills and that knowledge into their ESL components. And this way, it's when the students leave the IEP, they will feel more confident integrating into like university classes alongside their American peers. So, and that also gives us visibility, because we will also be part of the solution. You said that, Leanne. Yeah, we want to be part of the solution, not the problem.
Exactly. I see something in the chat. Will the link to the recording be sent to participants? Let's see, that's a question for, I think that might be a question for our moderator.
Hi, yes, the link will be sent within 1 to 2 weeks after the event.
Wonderful.
To your email.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And Robin is saying, yes, I want my dean to have this link to watch this webinar. I really recommend maybe getting some administration into a room for a discussion on these issues that you're having with your program and watching this webinar together with them. And just sharing with them, these are concerns that do impact the whole campus. We are not at the margins. IEPs are instrumental in bringing diversity into campuses, and it's what enriches a university. And so, to expect them to just struggle on their own without any support and without any integration into what the university does is not good for the university. And it's the same thing with community colleges, where we've got to invest in this diversity and we've got to support it. And if we don't, we can't say that we're really walking the talk with DEI. We can't say that. Until all of our students are included, we can't say that we are truly advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion of all.
I think it's almost time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for making the time to join us here. Again, these are just some ideas to get us think and see how we can make our programs more visible, how to create that good presence amongst, within our universities. We are important, whether it's community colleges, English programs, or IEPs. We're very important. We're so indispensable. And if we IEP people, for example, if we don't have that tone and voice in the way we say it, how important we are, no one is going to believe us. So it has to show in our attitude and in our behavior and our communication with our units. We are important, and we should continue to be so. Thank you again for everyone. And Nancy, want to wrap up?
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. And with that, we must conclude today's online program. A very special thank you to Leanne and Adil for this great presentation. And again, the link to the recording will be able to use. It will be sent to you by email within the next 2 weeks. Thank you very much, everybody. You may not disconnect.
Thank you very much to all. Thank you, Nancy. Thanks to all the attendees.
Thank you.